November 1944, a cold, rain-soaked forest in Western Europe. Inside an American Sherman tank, a young sergeant watches through his periscope as a German Tiger, 2 lines up its shot. Then a flash. An 88 mm shell tears through the mist. 2 seconds. That's how long it takes to decide if you live or if your tank becomes your coffin. The shell slams into the front of the Sherman with a thunderclap. The crew braces for fire, for molten steel, for death, but instead silence. The tank is still running. They are still alive. And the reason? Not thick-knit armor, not a secret weapon, just a small piece of rubber, worth less than $1. The problem: by late 1944, American tank crews feared one thing above all: the German King Tiger. The Tiger II mounted the legendary 88 mm gun, capable of punching through over 180 millimeters of armor at combat range. The Sherman tank's frontal armor, roughly half that, even with slope advantage. On paper, the math was brutal. When an 88 mm shell hit a Sherman head-on, survival wasn't expected. Even when the armor plate technically held, the tank often died anyway. Why? Because the force of impact traveled through the bolted front armor plate into the final drive housing behind it. The shock would crack internal components. Tracks would lock. The tank wouldn't explode. It would just sit there, immobile, waiting for the second shot. Most crews never survived that second shot. The discovery: one mechanic turned sergeant noticed something after inspecting destroyed Shermans. The armor wasn't always penetrated, but the internal structure behind it was shattered. It wasn't an armor thickness problem. It was a shock transfer problem. The tank was too rigid. Then came the idea: what if the energy could be absorbed instead of transmitted? During routine maintenance on another vehicle, he handled a thick, oil-resistant rubber gasket. Flexible, durable, shock-absorbing. That night in the dark, without permission, he and his crew loosened the bolts securing their tank's front armor plate. They inserted a thin rubber buffer between the armor plate and the internal housing. Then they re-tightened everything. Officially, it was unauthorized modification. Unofficially, it was survival insurance. The test days later, the test came. An 88 mm round hit the Sherman's front glacis plate dead center. The crew expected death. Instead, the plate dented, flexed, absorbed the impact. The shell ricocheted into the trees. The tank remained operational. For the first time, a Sherman had bounced an 88 mm hit. Word spread quietly across the battalion. At first, it sounded like myth. Shermans didn't bounce 88s. They burned. But the dent in the armor was proof. The secret spreads. Other crews began copying the modification. Rubber was scavenged from damaged equipment. Fuel pump seals, track pads, anything thick and resilient. Installations were done in barns, behind supply depots, in mud, in darkness. It wasn't official. It wasn't documented. It was a grassroots survival movement. And then something unexpected happened. Battle reports began to show increased survivability. Direct frontal hits that once meant guaranteed destruction now sometimes meant dents. Crews were surviving. Morale shifted. For the first time, tankers felt like they had a fighting chance. Higher command takes notice. Maintenance officers eventually discovered the modifications. Technically, it violated regulations. Altering armor mounting could have resulted in court-martial. But the data was undeniable. More tanks were surviving hits. More crews were coming home. Eventually, the concept reached division-level leadership. Field evaluations were authorized quietly. The modification was standardized in select units, not publicly celebrated, not officially engineered at factory level, but implemented where it mattered most, on the battlefield. Why it worked. The rubber acted as a primitive shock absorber. When a shell struck, instead of transferring all kinetic energy directly into the tank's internal structure, the compressed rubber layer dampened the shock. It allowed microflexing, energy dissipation. The armor still dented, but the catastrophic internal cracking was reduced. It didn't make the Sherman invincible. It made it resilient. And in war, resilience saves lives. Long-term impact. After the war, the modification faded into obscurity, but the principle lived on. Modern armored vehicle design no longer relies solely on raw thickness. It uses layered systems, energy dissipation, composite armor, spaced armor, shock isolation. The philosophy is simple. Don't just block force, disrupt it, absorb it, redirect it, all ideas that echo that simple field modification in 1944. The story isn't about a tank. It's about ingenuity under pressure, about soldiers who refuse to accept statistics as destiny. In a rain-soaked forest, facing one of the deadliest guns of the war, survival came not from steel alone, but from a mechanic's instinct, a small piece of rubber, and the courage to defy the manual. Because sometimes the difference between life and death isn't millions of dollars in technology. It's a simple idea installed by hand.